Hello, welcome to the Balance Podcast. I'm so excited to welcome Jane Pilger. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We actually went to high school together and we're both in Albuquerque today. So definitely small world.
Very small world. We're like down the street and we didn't realize it.
Yeah, we could have met in the same room instead of
Yeah.
Zoom. But anyway, well, tell us a little bit about your coaching practice. That's what excited me and made me want to invite you here today.
Yeah. So I help women who feel out of control around food. I help them develop food freedom and body trust. So a lot of the women that I work with specifically struggle with binge eating, just feeling out of control, binging, eating in secret, eating large quantities, eating um, kind of without other people knowing, and they just really feel like they can't trust themselves. Many of the women that I work with have been struggling with this for decades, have sought out other forms of treatment, and have kind of had little bits of success here and there, but then it comes back. It kind of keeps coming back. And so what I do is I really work with them to help them really tune in with themselves, tune in with their bodies, and really be able to use their bodies to guide them in everything, in all their decisions, and to develop that trust that their body really will help them, guide them, tell them what to do, and just kind of cultivate that safety within your body, safety with food, and also trust, which ultimately leads to that food freedom that so many people are looking for.
Right. So it kind of has this addictive quality.
What what
The
what
the
has
um the binge eating, like, is there an addictive component to it?
It can, yes, it kind of can be like it's some binge eaters very much feel like they're addicted. They might think they're addicted to either sugar, maybe they think they're
Mhm.
addicted to, that the process is kind of an addiction, and it can feel like that because
Mhm.
it is, there is this sense and sometimes this thinking that I'm out of control, I can't stop myself. So there can be this idea and this thought that it is addictive. I don't see it as an addiction. I see that there can be an addictive quality in terms of it's people use it for coping, right? It can be a form of a coping mechanism, but I find that the concept of it being addictive, sugar on its own is not an addictive substance. When we consume it in very large quantities, it can have certain effects in the body, but it's not like narcotics or something else that truly can have that addictive quality. So for example, if somebody, not everybody has the same reaction and the same response to eating sugar as say somebody
Mhm.
might, taking heroin or cocaine or drinking large amounts of alcohol or those types of
Mhm.
things. So I find that sometimes just the idea that something is addictive can actually set somebody up for the pattern when
Okay.
really it's more of kind of the thinking about it. If we're thinking that we're out of control, if we're thinking
Mhm.
we can't control ourselves, we almost set ourselves up for that, kind of fulfilling prophecy where then we act in that way. But it really isn't. So it can be almost like it can be kind of like an addictive behavior, but I don't believe that it's more of like that mindset,
Right.
that is really the
Well, thank
distinction.
you for that. Yeah, thank you for that teaching moment. I mean, that totally changed my perspective of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a psychologist, but I don't specialize in eating disorders, but that teaching is really powerful. And then if someone thinks it's an addiction, they turn it into an addiction. And then if you free them up, then they can say, oh, I can
Exactly.
listen to my body a little bit
Exactly.
more.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Well, who is your ideal client? What kind of clients do you enjoy working with?
I love working with women who have already done a good amount of work on themselves. So maybe they're really aware of their, they're aware of their behaviors, they're aware of their
Mhm.
patterns. Sometimes they're even aware of their thinking. Many of the clients that I'm working with right now, they've done a good amount of work on themselves, but they kind of know there's more. There's some
Mhm.
next level that they haven't really been able to discover before. And I
Mhm.
think the type of person who is committed to growth, to learning, who really already has some awareness, but realizes there's something else that's missing. There's some kind of component. I end up working a lot with women who are very smart, who are
Mhm.
very successful, who have, who are very almost cerebral, lots of thinkers, kind
Mhm.
of like very much they're able to have a lot of success in kind of doing things and being, kind of moving towards goals. But
Mhm.
what they don't have is that connection with themselves physically.
Mhm.
So maybe it's an emotional connection. Maybe they don't have, I call it emotional capacity. So meaning like your ability to even name your emotions is kind of like the starting place to like name the
Mhm.
emotions that you're experiencing, but then going on towards being able to actually be with any emotion, processing, knowing how to process emotion. So many people end up using food to avoid feeling other things. And so
Right.
if we can increase your emotional capacity, then you don't need to turn to the food for that way. So a
Mhm.
lot of times it's with very smart, very successful women who've done quite a bit of work on themselves, but the
Mhm.
work they haven't quite done is really the connection with their body, really kind of, with the emotional processing capacity. I also end up doing a lot of work with the nervous system. This was
Mhm.
really for me was such a huge piece, and I was kind of like really almost one of the missing pieces of the puzzle in
Mhm.
my own personal decades long journey with this with binge eating is really understanding the nervous system and
Mhm.
understanding how the body works. And so seeing that I was a person who was always, not always, but I experienced a pretty highly activated nervous system. So I had a lot of additional energy, kind of that fight or flight energy
Mhm.
in my body. And I taught myself at a very young age that food would help drain that energy and kind of
Mhm.
help get me into, what some people call the window of tolerance, where you're
Mhm.
in just a very grounded place in your nervous system. I basically taught myself that food would help me do that. And so once I got to learn about, oh, this is my nervous system. This is just how my body is responding to, kind of the signals and the messages and everything that it's receiving that's
Mhm.
going on, then I could see that I wasn't broken. And I thought for years, I thought I was broken. I thought there was something wrong with me. I didn't understand why I binged, and all I wanted to do was stop. But I kept focusing on the food and the behavior and what I ate and what I didn't eat, when
Mhm.
really the answer was more understanding my body and how my body worked and how my emotions work, and kind of
Mhm.
really developing that, not only the understanding of it all, but then the capacity to be with it and to connect with it and to kind of work with what was happening in my body at any point instead of trying to just get away from it.
Right, and so that could be anything like going for a run or over exercising. I mean, there's other
Mm-hmm.
ways to escape
Yes,
besides food,
absolutely.
but
Yes.
just being comfortable. Okay, I feel sad. I'm gonna sit with it, process it, and then move on.
Yes,
So,
just allowing it to be part of your experience, like
mhm.
I feel sad right now. Like so many times we think I feel sad and I don't want to be. I don't want to feel
Right.
sad. I don't want to feel this way. And so automatically we're we're resisting reality. And whenever we're pushing against what's really happening, we increase it. We when
Mhm.
we add that resistance to whatever's happening, we increase the negative emotion. And so and that happens when we have that desire. So the desire to eat, the desire to binge, the desire to go, escape into food, it's an emotion. So
Mhm.
it's sometimes people call it an urge, like the urge to eat, the urge to binge. Well, it's urgent desire is really kind of the name of that emotion. And so it feels
Mhm.
very urgent. It feels like I have to get some food right now. but what it truly is an emotion. And what happens with most of us is that we don't want that urge to be there. And so either it's like, oh, here it is again. I can't handle it. I can't be with this. And so we teach ourselves that eating makes the urge go away, which unfortunately is exactly the opposite of what's
it is
really
reinforcing.
true. It's reinforcing it. So it actually is just going to help it to come back, even stronger
Right.
the next time. But if we can be with that urge and see it as an emotion, as kind of just this experience of this chemical cocktail that's in our bodies, and we can allow it to be there, the magic is that every single emotion will pass on its own. When allowed to be a part of your experience, it will pass on its own. And the more you allow it to just be there, to pass on its own, and you don't respond to it, then it doesn't get the message that it needs to come back. You can kind of let it kind of burn out or like unwind itself. It kind of almost just discharges itself over time. Yeah.
And it has a different feel than hunger. Like hunger comes along more gradually versus this
Exactly. Yes,
emotion.
I like to distinguish the difference between physical hunger and then emotional hunger.
Right.
So physical hunger is exactly what you were just talking about. It's the kind, like, it comes on gradually. It can be satisfied with several different things.
Right.
It's kind of patient. Like it's just that's kind of physical hunger. Emotional hunger typically comes on very quickly. It is very urgent. It feels like it needs to be responded to right away. And it's generally for one of either a very specific type of food or a very specific food. Like that's the only thing
Right. Like
that
chocolate
will,
or
exactly, chocolate, or the drive-through, maybe French fries or a burger or pizza or
right.
donuts, or but it's kind of the very specific, and it has a lot of urgency, like it need to have that right now. So then when you can distinguish and understand, and this is part of really working with your body and understanding, is this physical hunger or is this emotional hunger? And being able to kind of parse that out. And for me, I would get a little confused by it, because there were some times in some ways that my emotional hunger was very obvious. It was very clear. But sometimes my initial urges to eat something, they felt very much like physical hunger. And so, there was really kind of this discovery process in like, okay, is this really physical hunger? Because I would get certain sensations, like physical sensations, literally in my stomach. Like I would get physical hunger, but it would also have the qualities of like, well, 30 seconds ago, I didn't feel this, and it would
Right.
feel a little more kind of like I was being pulled towards, kind of pulled towards an immediate, a much faster response to address it. And so, kind of being able to parse out like this is kind of like fake, it's almost feigning physical hunger so that I'll
Right.
respond
It's
to it. But
mimicking.
yes, it's mimicking. Yeah.
Wow. And do you incorporate mindfulness or meditation or things like that into your practice? I mean, as far as helping people get in touch with what they're really feeling.
I do. I end up using some mindfulness and kind of meditation techniques, although I don't always use those words, because sometimes people are a little kind of, sometimes people can be a little kind of think like, oh, it's mindfulness again, or I don't want to,
Right.
mindfully eat, and those types of things. But what I do is really emphasize through understanding the nervous system and how, when we are in that very calm and grounded place, I like to call it home base, which basically is like, home base is just where you're at home in your body. You are here. You and I are both in home base right now.
Yes.
We are able to have this conversation. We're present. We're here in this moment. And most of us know what that feels like. And most of us know what it feels like when you are kind of highly activated, where you're, kind of like maybe it's overwhelm or worry or fear or anxiety that feels like it's very kind of buzzy, very high active energy in your body.
Yes.
And we also know what it feels like to have very low energy, where you're in that just kind of like hopeless depression, like on the couch, can't do anything type of place. And so when we're in home base, it's called, that part of our nervous system, it's called rest and digest for a reason. And it's because it's where our body rests and digests the best. Meaning when we can eat, when we're in home base, our body is actually going to take on those nutrients in such a more it's just a more effective way. So our
Right.
body is going to be able to process it better. And so if it, through understanding the nervous system, if you can just understand when you're in rest and digest is the best time to eat, then you can take a few moments to kind of, before you eat, rather than saying, okay, I'm going to eat mindfully, it's kind of like, then you're just focused on the kind of like the what to do rather than the why. So when you can really think about it from the nervous system perspective and say, okay, I really want to make sure that I'm in home base because I know that my body will, kind of, not only will my body process this food better and these nutrients better, but I will also have more kind of connection towards even my fullness and satisfaction levels, kind of knowing, my body being able to tell me when it's had enough food. So if I know the why, then I can take a few moments, take some deep breaths, really bring myself into that home base
Right.
place, without just thinking like, okay, I need to eat with no distractions and, all the, kind of just
Right.
focusing on the,
And set down my fork and all that.
yes,
All the,
exactly. Yeah.
all the
And then
things.
it's just kind of like, okay, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I think this is where so many of us can get in trouble is it's like, just tell me what to do, right? So just give me the what to do, tell me what to eat, tell me what not to eat. And if that worked, none of us would have a problem, right? Because
Right.
there's no shortage of information out there about what to eat or what not to eat and, all of the different things. But it's really, really understanding kind of the why behind it. Everybody's needs are so individual. What your body needs is so different than what my body needs. And so if I just look to you to say, okay, well, Karen, what are you eating? Then, and I eat that way, then I'm actually not really responding to my true actual needs.
Right, or honoring yourself. And then if you're
Yes.
going to Hawaii for a triathlon, you probably need to eat more than I will that week.
Yes. Right.
Yes,
Yes.
or when you're
Exactly.
training, yeah, and
Yes.
honoring that. And
Yes.
well, at least I know when I was running, I mean, some of the volume of food that I ate was much
Yes.
more. And
Yes.
in my intellectual brain, it could be a binge, but it was
Yes.
just honoring the amount of
Yes.
calories that I put
Yes,
out.
which for sure happens, I think, especially with athletes when you have the very high activity levels. It can seem like you are eating inordinate amount of food, but it truly is actually what your body needs. And I have gotten into the place before where, even if I am with somebody who is doing a similar amount of activity to I am. So then I still end up comparing what I'm eating compared to what they're eating, thinking, oh, well, they're doing the same kind of activity. So therefore,
Right.
we should be about the same in terms of needs or whatever. And actually, that's not really true because their needs are very different than mine. Even doing the same activity level, right? Every
Right.
body just
Right.
happens to be different.
Right. So that's a good lesson on comparisons. By
Yes.
this point in our life, we should
Yes.
know better.
Yes.
So I love this concept of home base and connecting with yourself. So how does that make you a better athlete, a better wife, a better friend?
Hmm.
And then you're more able to connect. I mean, even just in this call, I feel very connected.
Yes, it's so much so. And it does for a couple of reasons. One is that as you learn what home base is and what it feels like, there's this like desire to be there more. And so you can really then learn how to recognize when you're getting out of it, either above it or below it. You can kind of start to recognize when it happens and then know what you need to do to bring yourself back in
Right.
before you get all the way out or get all the way underneath. You start to recognize that, and then you can recognize it in other people. And
Mhm.
just learning. I mean, the thing that's such a helpful tip for anybody who's listening to this, no matter if you struggle with food or not, the concept of home base and understanding that when you're in home base is really the only time that your logical brain is fully on board. So when you're fully activated or kind of in that depressed, hopeless, despair place, both of those are survival places for our nervous system, meaning the
Mhm.
part of our brain that is job is to keep us alive is highly activated. And so because of that, our logical brain is in some cases not on board at all, and in some cases it's just not as available. And this is why sometimes you end up acting in way either acting in ways, doing things, saying things you would never do when you're in home base, that you almost think like,
Mhm.
what just happened? That is not me. I can't believe. And,
Right.
and and this is where the binging happens. This is where the overeating happens.
Mhm.
It can happen when you're above or below, but it's when your logical brain isn't fully on board. And the same is true when you're having a conversation with somebody else. If they're activated, either very activated or kind of in that depressed place, their logical brain isn't fully on board either. So when you can start to recognize, not only for yourself, but for your loved ones, when they're in one of those places outside of home base, what you can
Mhm.
do is realize, okay, trying to have some sort of conversation with them that might involve more thinking or more, even like conflict resolution, those types of things,
Mhm.
those really can only happen effectively in home base.
Great tips. And do you have
Yeah.
any tips for our audience about balance? Living a
Mm.
balanced life.
I think the whole idea of balance is so, I think it's so interesting. And I think it's something that as we get older, we start to, I think, even appreciate balance. And I think for
Mhm.
me anyway, balance has looked so different over the years. And I know I have absolutely had periods where there hasn't been balance, where I've completely overworked, where, and honestly, I actually think a lot of my binging was because I was overworking. And so I wasn't actually allowing myself to rest.
Mhm.
One of the things I have learned so much is that my body and my mind actually require a whole lot more rest than I ever realized.
Mhm.
And binging for me was a way that my body would like force me to rest. And so once I realized that and I started giving myself more time, more space, more rest,
Mhm.
then I was able to, the binging, I didn't need to do that anymore because I was actually
Right.
allowing. So I think, really it's kind of figuring out um, where you don't feel balanced. And
Mhm.
in some cases, what's so interesting, it's kind of like food, right? We were talking about with the amount of food sometimes that I need to eat is often more than I think. It's more than I think I really need. I find the same with rest. A lot of times the amount of rest I need is actually more than I really think that I need. And then I can look and see, oh, I actually do have balance now that I've taken so much out of my life so that I'm not totally overworking, but I also have that balance of the growth and the learning
Mhm.
and, kind of the things that I know really fill me up, both from like a mental and cognitive standpoint, but
Mhm.
also then, from the physical standpoint and connection and kind of
Yeah.
all of those different areas.
Right. Well, I love that. Yeah. And I found that I need more rest. And
Mm,
then I realized, especially this year, but then I find if I pull back too much, I'm like, no, I need intellectual stimulation. I need connection.
yes,
I need to be in person. And
yes,
I'm more and more
yes,
comfortable with video. But yeah,
yes.
such great information. I mean, you're such an expert. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, thank
Absolutely.
you. All right.